What do you know about the daily life of an Anglo-Saxon peasant? Was it solitary, nasty, brutish, and short? Or should we take a more nuanced view of the lives of Anglo-Saxon peasants? The Anglo-Saxon period in England, roughly spanning from the 5th century until the Norman conquest in 1066, was marked by significant social, economic, and cultural changes. While much of the historical narrative focuses on kings, nobles, and warriors, the vast majority of the population consisted of peasants who lived and worked in rural settings. This essay delves into the daily life of an Anglo-Saxon peasant, exploring their economic activities, social structures, religious beliefs, and cultural practices. By examining archaeological evidence, historical records, and contemporary literature, we can gain a deeper understanding of the lived experiences of these often overlooked individuals. Economic activities and agricultural practices. Subsistence farming. The primary economic activity of Anglo-Saxon peasants was subsistence farming. Most peasants lived in small villages or hamlets, each surrounded by fields that were collectively known as the tun or ham. The land was typically organized into strips, with each family cultivating several strips in different fields. This system, known as open field farming, allowed for crop rotation, which was essential for maintaining soil fertility. The main crops grown included wheat, barley, oats, and rye, which provided the staples for the Anglo-Saxon diet, livestock, and animal husbandry. In addition to crop cultivation, livestock played a crucial role in the economy and daily life of Anglo-Saxon peasants. Commonly raised animals included cattle, sheep, pigs, and chickens. Cattle were particularly valuable, not only for their meat but also for their milk, which could be processed into butter and cheese. Sheep were prized for their wool, which was a vital resource for clothing and trade. Pigs were relatively easy to raise and could be allowed to forage in woodlands, providing a valuable source of protein. Seasonal activities and labor. The agricultural calendar dictated much of the daily and seasonal rhythms of life. Planting, tending, and harvesting crops were labor-intensive activities that required the cooperation of the entire community. Plowing typically began in early spring, followed by sowing. Weeding and maintenance occupied the summer months, and harvesting occurred in late summer to early autumn. After the harvest, the fields were often used for grazing livestock. Winter was a time for maintenance work, such as repairing tools and buildings, and for indoor activities like spinning and weaving. Social structure and community life. Village organization. The social structure of Anglo-Saxon villages was hierarchical, yet communal in nature. At the top of the local hierarchy were the free peasants, known as ceorl, who owned their own land or leased it from a lord. They had certain legal rights and responsibilities, including participation in the local moot, assembly, and the obligation to pay taxes or provide military service. Below the ceorl were the jeber or jenit, tenant farmers who worked the land in exchange for protection and a share of the produce. At the bottom were the theos or slaves, who had the least rights and performed the most laborious tasks. Roles and responsibilities. The roles and responsibilities within the village were divided along lines of gender and age. Men typically handled heavy agricultural work, such as plowing and harvesting, as well as responsibilities like constructing buildings and maintaining defenses. Women were primarily responsible for domestic tasks, including cooking, spinning, weaving, and child-rearing. However, women also participated in agricultural activities, especially during peak seasons. Children contributed by tending animals, gathering wood, and assisting in household chores. Community and festivities. Despite the hard work and rigid social structure, community life offered opportunities for socialization and recreation. Festivals and religious observances were key aspects of community life, providing occasions for feasting, music, and games. Notable celebrations included those marking the agricultural calendar, such as harvest festivals, as well as Christian holy days after the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons. These events helped to strengthen community bonds and provided a break from the routine of daily labor. Religion and beliefs. Pagan tradition. The early Anglo-Saxons practiced a form of Germanic paganism, characterized by the worship of gods and goddesses associated with natural forces and daily life. Key deities included Woden, Odin, the chief god associated with war and wisdom, Thunr, Thor, the god of thunder and storms, and Frigg, the goddess of fertility and love. Rituals and sacrifices were conducted to appease these deities and seek their favor for good harvests, fertility, and protection. Conversion to Christianity. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity began in the late 6th century with the mission of St. Augustine, sent by Pope Gregory the Great. The process was gradual, with many communities maintaining pagan practices alongside Christian ones for some time. The church became a central institution in village life, influencing not only religious practices but also social and economic activities. Monasteries and churches served as centers of learning, literacy, and charity, and the church calendar introduced new feasts and observances. Folk beliefs and superstitions. In addition to formal religious practices, Anglo-Saxon peasants held a variety of folk beliefs and superstitions. These included beliefs in spirits and supernatural creatures, such as elves and wights, which were thought to inhabit the natural world. Folk medicine and charms were commonly used to ward off illness or bring good fortune. The blending of pagan and Christian elements often resulted in unique local customs and practices. Housing and material culture. Housing structures. Anglo-Saxon peasants lived in simple wooden houses, typically constructed from locally available materials such as timber, wattle, and daub. The houses were generally single-room structures with thatched roofs and earthen floors. The hearth was the central feature of the home, providing warmth, light, and a place for cooking. Furniture was sparse, usually consisting of wooden benches, tables, and beds made from straw mattresses. Clothing and personal adornment. Clothing was made primarily from wool and linen, materials produced from the village's own resources. Men typically wore tunics and trousers, while women wore long dresses and cloaks. Both men and women might wear leather belts and simple jewelry, such as brooches or beads, depending on their status and wealth. Footwear was usually made from leather. The colors and quality of clothing varied, with natural dyes used to produce various hues. Tools and utensils. The tools and utensils used by Anglo-Saxon peasants were primarily made from wood, iron, and bone. Agricultural tools included plows, hoes, sickles, and scythes, while household utensils comprised wooden bowls, clay pots, and iron cooking implements. The craftsmanship of these items could vary significantly, with some being quite basic and others showing a high degree of skill and artistry. The use of tools and utensils was closely tied to the daily routines of farming, cooking, and crafting. Diet and cuisine. Staples and diet composition. The diet of Anglo-Saxon peasants was largely based on what they could grow and raise themselves. Bread made from wheat or barley was a staple, accompanied by pottage, a thick stew made from vegetables, grains, and occasionally meat. The diet was supplemented with dairy products such as cheese and butter, and during times of abundance, meat from livestock or game. Fish and seafood were also consumed, especially in coastal and riverine areas. Cooking and food preservation. Cooking was typically done over an open hearth, with food either boiled in pots or roasted on spits. Bread was baked in simple clay ovens or on flat stones. Preservation methods included salting, smoking, and drying, which were essential for ensuring a food supply during the winter months. Fermented foods and beverages, such as ale and mead, were common and often safer to drink than water, which could be contaminated. Feast and famine. The diet and food availability of Anglo-Saxon peasants were closely tied to the agricultural cycle and environmental conditions. Good harvests meant plentiful food and the possibility of feasting, while poor harvests could lead to scarcity and famine. Seasonal variation also played a role, with certain foods being more available at different times of the year. Social status could influence diet quality, with wealthier peasants and landowners having access to a more varied and nutritious diet. Education and literacy. Oral tradition and storytelling. The majority of Anglo-Saxon peasants were illiterate, and knowledge and culture were primarily transmitted through oral traditions. Storytelling was a key aspect of cultural life, with tales of heroes, gods, and historical events being passed down through generations. These stories often contained moral lessons or practical knowledge, such as farming techniques or local lore. The role of the church in education. The Christianization of Anglo-Saxon England brought an increase in literacy, primarily within the clergy and the monastic communities. Monasteries often maintained scriptoria where manuscripts were copied and produced, and they played a significant role in the education of the nobility and clergy. For peasants, however, direct access to education remained limited. The church did, however, influence the moral and ethical education of the community through sermons and religious instruction. Conclusion. The daily life of an Anglo-Saxon peasant was characterized by hard work, community involvement, and a close relationship with the natural world. While their lives were often marked by economic challenges and social limitations, peasants also played a crucial role in the agricultural and economic systems of medieval England. Their culture was rich in tradition, shaped by a blend of pagan and Christian beliefs, and reflected in their housing, clothing, and diet. Understanding the lives of Anglo-Saxon peasants provides valuable insight into the broader social and cultural history of early medieval England, highlighting the resilience and resourcefulness of these often overlooked members of society. Thanks for listening. Like and comment, and please subscribe as that will help us get more videos out to those interested in the Middle Ages. See you next time on Medieval Chronicles 1066 and stay curious.